So as soon as I see the light turn on, then I'll know that we're actually on. Half the time I don't know when we're actually on. Like I said, it's a little messy. Hi, everybody. What is today? It's COVID day 8,749. It is June 30th, 2020. And today I am being joined by one of my absolute favorite candidates on the whole entire planet. Her name is Kathleen Honne. Okay, so it's Honne, but it's pronounced Honne. So if like Lisa Bonet comes to mind, Kathleen is also beautiful like Lisa Bonet. So if that helps you remember, maybe that'll help. And before I get started today, I do have to go ahead and shamelessly talk about the fact that it is my last day for reporting for finances. It's the end of quarter 2 at midnight tonight. We have to have all of our donations in. I cannot believe the level of generosity from people. Whether it's, I had an old high school teacher who actually has donated to my campaign a few times, and some really people that I really look up to. So if you are able to help me to be able to surpass my goals, the website's right here, jc4mc.com. And that's it. I'll probably do another plug at the end, but I have to at least say something about fundraising because it's every candidate's favorite thing to do.
It is.
Right?
It's the best thing ever. I will make sure that I make a donation before the end of the night tonight, Miss Jeanne Casteen, because I adore you and you are one of my absolute favorite candidates as well.
Oh, you're so sweet. Gosh, I can't wait to see you in person again. So anyway, today I am joined by Kathleen Honne, and she is running for the House in Legislative District 22, which I think covers a lot of like North Phoenix, Glendale, Peoria, kind of the West Valley. She's going to tell you anyway. So Kathleen, go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody and give us a little background.
Well, hello, Miss Jeanne Casteen. It's so good to be with you virtually today, socially distancing. LD22 covers the far northwest valley of Maricopa County. Surprise, Sun City Grand, Sun City West, Natterburg, little tiny slice of Whitman, North Peoria, all the way up to the very edge of Lake Pleasant. So Glendale, little tiny slice of Glendale. And when I was a school teacher, I would teach my children that the way to remember my name was to ask them, do you own a bicycle or a skateboard? And they'd say, yes, teacher. And I'd say, well, my name is like, I own a bicycle. So that's how I would teach them, Honne. So now you'll never forget. And when I'm with a group of constituents, I will say, hip, hip, Honne, hip, hip, Honne. So, because I'm also a softball mom.
I love that because I am a softball daughter and coach. So none of my girls ever played softball, but you know, nobody's perfect.
You know, we all have our faults.
Right.
So yeah. So a little bit about me. I am a third generation Arizona native, proud daughter of the state of Arizona. Grew up on the southeast border in Douglas, where I met my lovely husband of 27 years. My dad, fun fact, was the Coors beer distributorship owner. So I was born and raised on Coors beer, put me through college. We raised everything known to man on our little gentleman's ranch. 4-H and FFA are where I got all my values from of, you know, leadership and responsibility to my community and service and all those good things. My husband and I went to Silver City, New Mexico to get our education. And, you know, just I think from 4-H, I got that desire just to continue service and like you went into education. It's been about 20 years now. My husband has a learning disability, which makes him the best teacher in the world. And as an administrator, you know that I'm a qualified evaluator. So I'm actually certified to make that designation. But learning was easy for me, so teaching was hard. So I quickly transitioned into a counseling master's and then into an administrative master's. And man, being a middle school assistant principal was the funnest job I ever had. So going down to the Arizona Capitol and working with a bunch of men, especially the few Republican men that I expect to be left next January, I think is going to be easy peasy after breaking up middle school boy fights.
Oh man, that's so funny that you say that. So I am middle school and high school teacher, English and social studies. I don't get me wrong, I love my middle schoolers, but I sometimes like need a break from them. So then I go back to high school, then I come back to middle school. I always say the same thing. If I can handle a room of 45 middle schoolers, then I can handle going down to the Capitol and advocating for our kids. I've done it plenty of times before. I can handle politics too, because it's sometimes a little bit like middle school. So I think we're designed to run for something if we've been working with middle schoolers.
I agree. And before I ended my career as a middle school administrator, I spent quite a few years as a grant administrator. And that was hard, labor intensive work and a lot of flying back and forth between here and DC. But that taught me how to navigate a lot of the bureaucratic red tape, which is also going to be a huge help down at the Capitol, because I can kind of cut through the BS pretty quickly. So,
yeah. And I mean, here in Arizona, as we've seen, really, well, for the last 50 years, but really this year, 2020 has really shown us that there's a lot of it to cut through. So thank you for stepping up and running. So what made you, aside from you being skilled at handling a bunch of middle schoolers, what made you finally decide, because it's not easy to run for office. You're putting yourself out there, you're putting your family out there. Why did you decide to run in LD22?
In 2018, when the teachers of Arizona decided to step out of their classrooms for their children, I went with them. And I tried so hard to sit down with my representatives and say, I have ideas. I know what we could do. I know some of the few skills that we could employ that could make a big difference. And I found out really quickly that they were really happy with what we were doing, that they had no intention of doing anything differently. One of my current representatives, after I'd say 15 emails, 15 phone calls, and 4 attempts to meet him outside a hearing room or face-to-face across the dais, finally met with me. The other 2, I never once heard back from. And I finally said, this is enough. If you will not represent me, someone who's making this hard of an effort to meet with you, I'm just going to take your job from you.
Yep. Well, good. I'm glad that you did. I remember too, back in 2018, when, there was a sea of red, marching towards the Capitol. And I think that was a Thursday. And then of course, a lot of I don't remember if it was the Senate or the House or both, but they decided to recess. So the teachers were left there, no opportunities to be able to engage with any of their elected officials because they all decided to shut it down. So then on Monday, everybody showed up with welcome back signs. The Red Fred band was playing and they had the welcome back, it was so great. And these women that were there who are from places like Kingman or places like Prescott, a little bit more rural, perhaps more conservative, many of them were registered Republicans. And we started talking about how they tried to schedule meetings with their GOP representatives and senators, and they flat out refused to meet with them. I mean, these are women and men who voted for you, and you can't even make the time to talk to them about the challenges that they face as public educators in Arizona. Well, guess what? A whole bunch of those people, while everybody was down there and all of our other trade union brothers and sisters were supporting us by giving us food and drinks, they changed their voter registration. So I don't know what the chances are in some of those places, but the fact that they basically said to these public servants, like, you're not even important enough for me to schedule a meeting with you, that just speaks volumes. So thank you for stepping up and for running.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think that that's the bottom line. And that's always been my commitment since last summer when I decided that this is just enough. This is not okay with me. This is not what our children deserve, first of all, or our seniors. You know, LD22 is a very senior population, and our seniors deserve better. They deserve people who are going to listen to them and represent them. When I went through my opponent's signature sheets, I think out of, you know, the 100 or so signature sheets that were turned in, maybe 5 of them had their actual signatures on the back. The majority of them were collected by paid circulators, which means they didn't actually go out and talk to any of the people that are electing them. That's not okay with me.
Yeah, that, I mean, that's truly my favorite part. And it's been hard to be stuck at home because I love being able to talk to people, you know, and knock on their doors and find out what's an issue that you're facing, and you know, let's talk about that. I loved going to the street fairs, and while I was getting signatures, so many people were coming up to me and saying, you know, I've been a lifelong Republican, but something needs to change here. So it's really kind of, it's frustrating, and it makes me sad, and it makes me angry all at once. But I do feel like the tides are turning here in Arizona, and that 2020 really is the year that we could see some real change, and for everybody, you know, for our seniors, for our students, for our most vulnerable communities. So can you, let's talk a little bit about COVID, because I remember you and I were on uh, like a chat discussion, a Zoom meeting with a bunch of education advocates. And something that you brought up, I refer to this story all the time. You mentioned that your husband's an educator. I believe it's PE. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
And he was talking about how his district had decided to handle Q4 of last year. And I'll never forget the story about the young man who was your husband's student who worked at the grocery store, and how your husband was able to kind of modify and accommodate for this kid. So can you tell that story? It's such a good story.
Sure. Yeah, so he works for Tolleson Union High School District, which is a very diverse district. And he has a very diverse population. And so my husband's an avid racquetball player. And so he was on his way to go play outdoor racquetball one morning and stopped at the local Fry's Marketplace and ran into 2 of his students and, you know, said, "Hey guys, I haven't seen any of your assignments turned in." And they said, "Well, coach, you know, we're working, we're trying to help our family. Our parents got laid off, you know, we're trying to help our family." And he said, "Well, this kind of looks like back-breaking work to me. What I asked you to do was do physical activity every day and journal about that. Can you do that? Can you record that in your journal?" And they said, "Well, is that okay, coach? You know, is that okay?" And he said, "Well, of course. Is what you're doing physical?" "Yes, coach." "Do you have the time and access to the internet to record that?" "Yes, coach." "All right, then we're good." You know, and then on his way out of the store, he ran into another mom who said, "Mi hijo, no dile nada. You know, my son, he won't do anything." And he said, "Put him to work in the yard, make him clean the yard, teach him to mop the floor. I'm sure there's things you've always wanted to teach your son to do. Now's the time, teach him to do it. Get him doing something physical. That's all he needs to do is something physical. I just want him moving, you know?" And I think that's the brilliance of our educators here in education. I mean, here in Arizona, is we have put them through some of the hardest things since 2008. And they have adapted. They adapted over a weekend, some of them.
Yeah.
And they figured it out. I never thought my husband would be sitting on the couch teaching PE. And yet he did it for 9 weeks. And, you know, he was so disappointed when his district had to cancel graduation because he was looking forward to it. And he still has softball gifts for his softball team. This past semester, his daughter and he were going to get to teach. We're going to get to coach softball together, and they're not coaching softball together, but they will next year because my daughter just signed her first teaching contract. So,
Oh, great. And what
yeah.
district?
Same one, Tolleson Union High School District.
Oh, how cool. You know, that's funny because I was also a friend of mine, Rebecca. She kind of got recruited by another friend of hers to do some girls softball in Levine. And I want to say it was like a week before we went into self-quarantine. So I got to do one softball practice, and oh my gosh, it was like it's like putting on a comfortable pair of shoes, you know, like it's one of my favorite things. You know, and we were talking earlier too about the softball team that decided to, because okay, from what I understand, their coach took a picture of them while they were all standing for the Star Spangled Banner, and she made it a political post. Instead of just saying, here's my girls, I'm so proud of them, she said something about America and Trump and I don't know, MAGA, I don't know. And her team ended up, the entire team ended up quitting. And you know, you posted that, I posted that. And so it just made me think of, you know, how this thing that was so politicized now has become something that hopefully will allow people to maybe open their eyes and see some of the things that are going on. And that's why we need teachers like you, educators like your husband, who can really see their students as human beings who have struggles, and that they can monitor and adjust and make accommodations when they need it, you know?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit too about COVID, because, you know, we've seen what a mess this has been. What are your thoughts about opening schools next year?
Well, I like what I've seen a bunch of educators. First, let me say this. I have been an administrator and a teacher in multiple crises. And so I refuse to judge what other leaders do in crises. From our president to our governor to anyone else. So I will not judge them. I will let voters and history do that. So I will be clear and consistent about that. I do like what multiple people have said about we should not be making decisions about whether or not schools open via Zoom. That's not appropriate. We should not make decisions about whether or not children can sit in classrooms this way. You know, it's not appropriate. I know that children need the opportunity to socialize. I have a 3-year-old granddaughter who got to see her best friend about a week ago. And when I asked her how it was, she told me that he hit her because they hadn't seen each other in 6 weeks. She hadn't had any interaction with any other 3-year-olds in 6 weeks. And kids need the opportunity to interact. I don't know what the answer is to that. We need to find answers to those questions. I think about our preschoolers who we don't know how to find answers to that because they're not as susceptible to this, but they can be carriers. We don't have the data for that. I live with my 81-year-old mother who I am constantly fearful for that I'm going to bring into the house. My husband's going to bring it into the house. So we as a country need better data. We need better guidelines. We need better people telling us, here are the things that if you do these right, we will come out of this clearer. We have countries like Taiwan who do the right things and their economy is flowing beautifully. And I wish that we had those things going on here, because I think our education would be opening up in a very clear and concise way. And it doesn't need to be a political discussion. And I don't know why we continue to make things that are medical political, because I know that when I walk into my doctor's office and the day that I die and they roll me on a slab, the one question they're not asking me is whether I was a Democrat or Republican. I know that for a fact.
It's really It's really frustrating to see the level of willful ignorance here. You know, I didn't realize how many of my acquaintances throughout my life had degrees in epidemiology and virology. I had no idea.
Dr.
Um,
Scholl?
oh boy, you know, and so it's hard. And what I've seen, and I say this over and over, whenever I have one of these little chats, that I see the leadership coming from the bottom. You know, I see Mariana Sandoval here, who's a wonderful school board candidate from the Agua Fria School District. I see Sophia Ramirez, who's on here, who's an amazing candidate running here in the Creighton District. Eric Kurland, though not a school board member, is somebody who's running in LD23. And this is why we need educators as leaders, because we are the ones who, you know, who understand what it's like to be in a classroom of 45 middle schoolers, or to do a home visit with a kid who is living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 10 other people. You know, we need those voices at the table. And so far, it has been those voices, those school board leaders. You know, somebody just approached me last night and said, hey, we've put together another letter to the governor to say, let's suspend this testing. You know, in the Creighton School District, on our board, we were able to pass a resolution saying, you know, we have a problem with our standardized tests and how they are racially biased, and how we use funding to punish schools and to shame schools and teachers. You know, I, at one point in my career, had some of the highest writing scores in the district where I was working. And then, you know, I went to a district where we were then classified as an F school. And so that affected my 301 money, which is absolutely ridiculous that my bonus is tied to it. Because here's the thing, my kids were also brilliant, and some of the poetry and the spoken word that they could do was off the charts. You know, something that you would see on MTV's Deaf Poetry Jam circa 2000 or 2001. You know, I mean, like these brilliant, but they couldn't necessarily perform on tests. And
Right.
often, when you think about the fact that you've got 11 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, and this kid is expected to do that work sometimes on their phone, or if they don't have internet, then they, you know, we heard stories about people camping out outside their school buildings so that they could pick up the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
We have issues here, and it's our school board members who are crushing it on that level. And again, I'll go back to why this office is so important, because the county superintendent handles school board appointments. And so it's normally 30 to 50 in a 4-year term. We could be looking at 100 appointments in this first year for the next county superintendent. So that's my second plug. I said I would have 2. So that's why my campaign needs your support.
Well, and the thing about that frustrates me is that one of my platforms is cleaning up politics and getting the big money donors out of political campaigns, because, you know, when you still are someone who pays for cable like I do, you 24/7 get the political ads that are paid for by these super PACs. And it's all about what's happening in Washington. And Washington does not impact your day-to-day living. School board candidates, city council candidates, and this is not even a plug for myself. Although what I want to do at the Arizona House of Representatives will impact what school board candidates have the funding to do, and we will not have to run these continual ridiculous school bonds and overrides, which, if the Arizona House and Senate would finally do what the Constitution says they're supposed to do, we could stop doing.
Yeah.
But getting these political PACs out of our elections would allow school board candidates to actually do their job, because our children are what matters. And if we raise educated kids with curriculum that actually is socially justifiable, then we have an economy that works for everyone. And when we have candidates who recognize that and who say to one another, you and I were not raised that way, but we now recognize it and we're willing to do better, then.
It's a game changer. I mean, you know, I'm so excited because also on my board, I'm going to be collaborating with another board member. You know, I brought my own Black Lives Matter resolution to the board, and she had some really great additions to add on to it. And I'm excited that we're going to be working on that. I'm excited that we're going to really put the mirror up to ourselves and take a look at, you know, is this curriculum up to date? Is it honest? And does it, you know, acknowledge some of our really uncomfortable truths, you know, and how are we supporting our teachers to facilitate trainings in implicit bias, learning about our kids' ACEs, learning about trauma-informed care. Like that's what school board races can do. So as the next House representative for LD22, Kathleen, what would you like to see? What would you like to bring to the legislature when it comes to education policy?
Well, the first thing I'm going to bring is a code of ethics to the House and the Senate, because once we have a code of ethics, we can get over all of the nonsense that happens that stops them from doing legislation from day to day. So let's start with that. But for education, we're going to fix the funding so that we can have a funding formula that just flows and works and that people understand and that works from year to year, no matter who's in control. It's not going to matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat House and Senate or governor. It's just going to flow and people are going to be able to understand it, whether you're a mom, a dad, a grandma, or a school board. We have to have it. And then we have to have safe learning environments. We need to have safety teams on each campus that include a social worker, a counselor, a nurse, a psychologist, an administrator, and someone from the law enforcement community who's on hand and available to come in and provide guidance when it's needed to say, you know, we're not sure if we have a threat here that we need to make you aware of or not. Because I've learned a lot thanks to my community of color that I can turn to and say, I need an education on this. And I've changed my position on this because 6 weeks ago, I was a person who said we need a school resource officer on every campus. And I think I'm changing my view on that.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I've talked about it before. We've had that vote come up before in my district. And, you know, you really have to consider the organization to which these SROs belong. And while they may as individuals be wonderful people, it's not about those individuals necessarily. It's about that organization. And do we really want to have a partnership with that organization? And I think the way you put it is perfect, you know, because there are situations that we've seen also too many times on the news where you do get somebody who comes onto a campus and who poses a threat, but there's also never been one single SRO that's saved anybody from those threats. So at that point and at that point only are the times that we need to bring somebody in to, you know, assist us in keeping our kids safe, because I know that I will put myself in between my student and a bullet in a heartbeat. And that's yeah.
And when the whole guns in schools and arming teachers discussion came up, we have gone round and round on that topic in this house for ad nauseum. And my husband has said over and over again, I will stand in front of any one of my students and take a bullet for them. I would never turn a corner with a gun in my hand and aim it at one of my students holding a gun, if he was the one. And by the way, my husband is a 6'3" large Hispanic man who goes to school in gym shorts and a t-shirt. So if there is law enforcement on campus and he's holding a gun, he's probably going to be presumed to be the assailant.
Right.
And I'm going to be getting the call that my husband's laying dead on the school campus. So no, thank you. By the way,
there's a really good question on the, so David, it looks like David Birnbaum. I should have my glasses on. It looks like David Birnbaum. He says, first off, when we're talking about your husband, great way to offer alternative pathways to show mastery. I agree. That's why I wanted you to tell the story. And then he also asked, could a counselor do the social things that SROs do, like restorative justice? And that's an interesting question, because unless you have a memorandum of understanding with your local police department, you know, like they don't have to, the one thing they have to do is, what is it called? Law related education, LRE classes, where they provide, and they, you know, I've had really great SROs in my experience as a teacher, where they come in and talk about things that are super relevant, like opioid use. They talk about, you know, all kinds of different things, relationship violence, and things that are relevant to my students. But very rarely, I don't think I've ever seen where they actually do the restorative justice things. I've worked with some who just do that because that's the kind of person they are, but that's really more of a district initiative. And that's something that I think social workers are far more skilled in, is those kinds of restorative conversations, than our police officers are. I mean, we've kind of, unfortunately, we've kind of seen that there's not a lot of that restorative conversation happening necessarily within our police departments, which is why I'm glad that we are talking about things like defunding the police, restructuring, whatever people feel comfortable calling it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. So, you know, if we're going to talk about that, we need to talk about what is it that our communities need, and how do we define public safety outside of that whole, like, you know, officer in a uniform carrying weapons kind of thing, you know?
So from 2000 to 2005, I was honored to run the Safe Schools Healthy Students grant for Dysart Unified School District. And it was the most amazing opportunity. It was $5 million, and it was a collaboration, and it brought school resource officers in, and they were amazing, and they hated teaching the curriculum. It was the worst part of their job. And all the law enforcement officers I've interacted with have said, we have too much on our plates. We want to be police officers. We want to protect and serve our community. And so they are begging to have things taken off their plate. They want to do the job they were hired to do.
Yeah.
So yes.
So, okay, I've gone over, because like as educators, I think my husband always jokes and says, oh, you're getting together with your teacher friends, you're just going to yell at each other the whole time. Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, that's it.
So I think you got your fives, right? So for everybody who doesn't know, Kathleen is a clean elections candidate. So she doesn't do the traditional kind of fundraising the way that the other traditional campaigns do it. So you have your fives turned in. Obviously, you turned your signatures in long ago. Can you still get seed money?
I can still get up to $170 from anyone in the country who's a registered voter, if they'd like to, at www.one4arizona.org. And I would be happy to take your money. You can also find all my platform information there. And I absolutely support Miss Jeanne Casteen for Maricopa County Superintendent, because she is going to rock this county in getting us exactly what our students deserve and what our school boards deserve. We have got to have her in office so that we can. I believe that the way that our system is working is broken, and we have to have great candidates from school board all the way to the White House, and we have to all work together.
Yep, agreed. All right, so let's end it with a nice little fun fact about Kathleen Honne. So Kathleen, tell us something about yourself that perhaps we would never guess. A hidden talent, a hobby, a secret guilty pleasure. What is it?
I love reality TV, which is another reason why the Arizona House of Representatives is not going to be a problem, because the Real Housewives of Orange County have nothing on the Arizona House of Representatives.
Oh, that's hilarious. So are you into all the different varieties of Real Housewives?
Every one of them. Every single one of them. I was trying to think of which fun fact you'd want to hear. I used to ride, because I used to do triathlons. I also used to ride my bike to bus stops when I had naughty children at them, because they could see my car coming, but they would never see me coming up on my bicycle.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I totally just got the vision of the Wicked Witch of the West, like Dun, 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 dun. Like that's, I just like, uh-oh, here comes Principal One, we're in trouble. I love that. Well, I thank you so much. I'm so glad that I've been able to see your face for this long, because it's been far too long. We used to run into each other every weekend at least, when we were able to go out and about. So I want everybody to make sure that you support Kathleen Honne, and I put the link for her website here on the chat. I think tomorrow it's Senator Martin Quesada from LD29.
29.
I should have that right. Yeah, LD29, another West Side representative and a huge advocate for education. So hopefully I'll see everybody tomorrow. And thank you so much, Kathleen. Best of luck to you. Break a leg. You're going to knock this out of the park. I can't wait to celebrate.
I will be out with Senator Quesada Saturday morning dropping lit. So
awesome.
Because we win together.
Awesome. Yes. So again, go to our website if you want to sign up to try to get in on that party. It sounds awesome. Then do so. And Kathleen, until next time, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.